As India-China border tensions continue to simmer, the Indian Defence Ministry has dared China on Tibet occupation. India has named a mountain peak in Tawang region of Arunachal Pradesh after the Dalai Lama. Now this has got China rattled as it reminds the world that the country of Tibet remains under Chinese military occupation since the 1950s. As expected, China reacted sharply by playing its own Tibet card and laying baseless claims to the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. CCP claims it wants to occupy Arunachal as well. Chinese Foreign Ministry stated, quote, "The area of Zhangnan is Chinese territory and it's illegal and null and void for India to set up the so-called Arunachal Pradesh in Chinese territory. This has been China's consistent position," unquote. Now do not be surprised. I'm sure in the near future, CCP will even claim Antarctica as Chinese territory or the Olympus Mons on Mars simply because it looks red. A team of 15 mountaineers from the National Institute of Mountaineering and Adventure Sports, which comes under the Ministry of Defense, climbed this peak for the very first time in history. Now Beijing, being the very first climbers, they named it Sangyan Gyatso Peak after the 6th Dalai Lama, who had been born in Tawang region back in 17th and 18th century. The naming highlights the deep bond between Indian and Tibetan people. The Defense Ministry says the naming is a tribute to the 6th Dalai Lama. But this got CCP leadership all worked up in Beijing. To them, the Tibetan spiritual leader, Dalai Lama, is nothing but a separatist. The current Dalai Lama and hundreds and thousands of Tibetans had to flee and found refuge in India to escape Chinese PLA tyranny back in the 1950s. So as long as China claims Arunachal, can there ever be peace between India and China? Now, India and Tibet had been neighbors for thousands of years and not India and China. Indian and Chinese civilizations had been separated for thousands of years by Tibet. Hindu holy sites including Kailash Mansarovar lie in Tibet, while there are scores of ancient Tibetan monasteries in India. But all that cultural exchange ended with Chinese military occupation of Tibet in 1950s, which continues to this day. China's reaction also exposes its lies and dual speak on the LAC tensions. China has been desperately trying for Indian government to accept the new normal and pushing for consensus in the media at a time when PLA troops continue to occupy previously neutral territory in Depsang and Demchok in Ladakh. The Chinese Defense Ministry issued a statement on the 26th of September stating, quote, "The nations were able to reduce their differences and build some consensus besides agreeing to strengthen dialogue to accommodate each other's legitimate concerns," unquote. This came after a meeting between Prime Minister Modi's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi recently. Meanwhile, there remains a formidable deployment of 50 to 60,000 troops by the Indian Army and Indian Air Force along the LAC in Ladakh to counter any Chinese misadventure. China has been boosting its military infrastructure along the LAC with a bridge over the Pangong Lake in Ladakh. Satellite images have also revealed underground bunkers and hardened shelters. While last month Chinese graffiti was found dozens of kilometers inside Arunachal Pradesh's Anjar district. So on one hand, China claims consensus on de-escalation with India, and on the other hand, it goes on to object, naming the Dalai Lama peak, boosting military infrastructure, makes incursions into Indian territory, while also claims Arunachal Pradesh. So can India ever trust China? External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar highlighted the China problem a couple of days ago, explaining, quote, "Now the problem was in 2020, despite very explicit agreements, we saw that the Chinese, we were all in the middle of COVID at that time, moved a large number of forces in violation of these agreements to the line of actual control, and we responded in kind. Once troops were deployed very close up, which is very dangerous, it was likely a mishap could happen, and it did happen." Chinese ambassador to India, meanwhile, has been urging New Delhi to see China as a partner and not a rival. Xu Feihong on the 25th of September said, quote, "We should firmly implement the important consensus reached between the two leaders, correctly view each other's development and strategic intentions, and mutually accommodate each other's core interests and major concerns," unquote. So why are multiple Chinese leaders pushing the agenda of consensus suddenly? What has prompted this change? Why does China want India as a friend suddenly? Well, two things may have sparked this change of tone. Firstly, the commitment to the Quad military alliance by leaders of India, USA, Japan and Australia at the Quad Leaders Summit recently. And secondly is the revival of the Free Tibet movement. which got a massive boost after US Congress delegation visited the Dalai Lama first in Dharamsala in India and then in the United States itself. Meanwhile, Indian restrictions remain on Chinese investments, visas and direct flights. India's naming of an Arunachal peak after the sixth Dalai Lama is also a subtle moral support by India being offered to the Tibetan people and their cause. China hates this. CCP does not want India to escalate the Quad or the Tibetan cause and has indicated it would be prepared to barter peace as long as India accepts its border position and new normal. But the Modi government has made it clear, defense before economy. Relations will not normalize unless the PLA pulls back from all friction points and respects the pre-2020 status quo at the NSC. As far as Arunachal Pradesh is concerned, it has been legally Indian territory ever since the governments of India and Tibet agreed to the McMahon Line back in 1914, before China sent its troops and occupied Tibet in the 1950s. Even the United States Congress passed a resolution recognizing Arunachal as Indian territory. So Chinese statement is nothing but a habit of the CCP of claiming territory of its neighbors. Just ask Taiwan or Philippines or Vietnam or Japan or Mongolia or even Russia. The big question remains, can India ever trust China? Leave a comment with your opinion, hit the like button and subscribe to Inconnect News.